Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm here with Eddy Mindlin today. He is a certified SCORE mentor and volunteer, and I'm Leslie with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center. We're here to present to you a webinar on the 3 steps to attracting and retaining customers, sales essentials everyone should know. So it's great because he kind of brings everything really compact for you on how to work on your customers. And we were shut down for a long time and now we're back open again, so this is really good training. I want to remind everyone to make sure you set your Zoom ratio to fit Windows. We're using the Q&A function to take questions, so type any question you have into the Q&A and we'll pick them up throughout the entire webinar. We have a list of COVID-19 business resources. You don't have to worry about shooting this or writing it down, because we send you a copy of the webinar afterwards with all the information. He's got a great cold call handout that we're also going to be sending to you, because I think I asked him that last time and that can be really tricky. So we have that available. We have this month alone, we have over 35 webinars at no cost to you. So take advantage of everything that we've got going on. I think I've covered everything. Eddy, are you ready to get going? I'll turn it over to you.
Yep, I'm ready, Leslie. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking an hour of your time to hopefully get some good information from me on sales. Every business, no matter what they're doing, is always trying to get more sales and retain clients and try to figure out, how do I do better at getting more business? So I'm going to help you with this. So the first thing I want to talk about is practice and preparation. Now, Peyton Manning is on the left there. Most of you know that he was a great football player, quarterback. And then the lady on the right is a lady named Pat Summitt. And she was a wonderful basketball player in her own right in college. And she was a coach at the University of Tennessee women's basketball for many, many years. And she was the most winning coach ever. And they talk a lot about practice and preparation. And I'm going to read to you their quotes that I actually have in a book that I wrote on sales, because it applies to sales. So practicing and preparing for sports, for being an actor, for being, any kind of a professional athlete, all these kinds of things, you have to practice and prepare, and it absolutely applies to sales. So the quote that I have about Peyton Manning is, "I never left the field feeling I could have done more to prepare, and that gives me peace of mind." So what he knew is that he had done everything possible to prepare for that football game. Just like you or people that work at your company that are in sales, you have to prepare for every sales call, every email that you send out, every text, be prepared. And then Pat Summitt's quote that I love so much is, "Most people get excited about the games. I have to get excited about practice, because that's my classroom." So that's where she does the teaching. So what I want each of you to know and share with any of your coworkers or whatever is that sales is the exact same thing. You've got to be prepared for what you're going to do, and you have to practice. Just like I practice for this webinar. I know what I'm going to say. You have to know what you're going to say at each sales call, each email that you send somebody, every communication. I'm going to talk to you about the art of selling. A lot of people think there isn't an art to selling, but I can promise you there is. And I'm going to teach you things that will help you be very effective. It's important to have a coach for many, many reasons, and an ongoing relationship with a coach. And the main reason is we cannot see ourselves what we're doing wrong. And I promise you that every professional athlete, every professional dancer, movie star that makes millions and millions of dollars, they all have coaches. So people say, why do they have coaches? That they're multi-millionaires. because they like what they're doing. They want to continue to make all this money, and they know that they need help. And it's just like you and me. I had a coach my whole career when I was in sales. And just so you know, I had my own business for about 32 years representing companies that make floor covering products like carpet and tile and basketball flooring. And so I was what's called a manufacturer's representative. So I was on straight commission for my whole career, and I loved that. But I always had a coach and always had people that I could get ideas from, and I hope you'll do that as well. So the goal is to meet more people to increase sales. Also, a big goal is to retain clients. A lot of people think that sales is just about getting new customers and doing more with those new customers. But I can tell you that the cost to you emotionally, physically, and financially to go out and get a new client is very high. It takes a lot of energy, and it can take money and your time to get new clients. So I highly suggest you work on retaining the clients you have. And what that means is you've got to take very good care of them, because if you don't, they will go somewhere else. So when you think of sales, don't just think of new customers and getting people to buy more and more. That's good, but you also want to retain the clients you have and make sure you address every situation that could come up with them, like problems with delivery of a product you may have, or maybe they bought a product a year ago. You want to stay in touch with them to make sure they're still happy. So we all need to take action if we're going to get better. Just like the pro athletes I've talked about, we need to invest in ourselves. And I don't necessarily mean financial investment, but I do mean you've got to take the time, like I said before, to reach out to a coach, a mentor. And by the way, I'm a volunteer with SCORE, SCORE, which is a national organization, and we offer free mentoring and workshops and things like that. And Leslie and her group with SBDC do a lot of things as well, obviously with this webinar that's free, and she puts on many of these. And so the more you take advantage of these things, the better you're going to be. And most of these things, like with SCORE and SBDC, are free of charge to you. So if you get one thing out of anything, you're ahead of everybody else that you're competing with. So I hope you'll all take time to invest in yourself. This is, I guess, a bunch of salespeople kind of thinking about what's next. And I'm going to try to help you with those things by talking about 3 specific tips to help you today. And then I'll go into details of each of these 3 topics, which in my opinion, and again, I've been in sales for over 40 years, having my own business for 32 years. I've probably made every mistake that can be made. And really my goal as a volunteer for all of you and anybody else that wants assistance is to hopefully make it so that you don't make as many mistakes as I made. So let's talk about organizational skills and organizing for success and getting prepared. So I'm going to tell you how I did this for my whole career. And in no way am I suggesting you do it the same way I do it. I did it using a lot of pieces of paper. A lot of you will probably just use the computer. I'm trying to just give you an example so you'll have in your head of how I did it and I was successful. And if you do something similar that works for you, you will be successful too. So again, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just trying to get you to think of how can you be better organized. So what I did is I had 2 stacks of projects. I used to write, and I worked, by the way, by the project. Of course, I don't know what business you guys are in. I don't know if you work retail. I don't know if you're making calls out, to buildings, and going to actual, brick and mortar stores and calling on, dentist office, or I used to call on architects a lot in my work, trying to get them to select material, the flooring for their projects. So here's what I did. I had 2 stacks of projects. But what I did is on a piece of paper, when I knew about a project, I'll just give you an example. So an architect is working on a school and they're designing a school. They're designing a church. It doesn't matter. Is I would write down the name of the project on the piece of paper and then everything I knew about it. So I would write down the architect's name, phone number, everything about it. And then I would talk to that architect about the project. And then I would find out when will be the next step as far as them making a selection on flooring. And they would tell me. And then I would make up figure out a date to follow up, which by the way is going to be the next thing we're going to talk about is follow up. And I would put that date in the upper right corner of the piece of paper. So basically I have hopefully a ton of stacks of paper or pieces of paper, I should say, all with a date in the top right corner, which is when I'm going to get back with them. Okay, on the top, and we'll just use the word shelf because everybody can understand what that means. So I have 2 shelves, let's just say. The top shelf is all the projects I'm going to be following up on August of 22. The bottom shelf is any project that has a date of September 22nd and beyond. And so what I would do is at the end of every week is I would take out the stack of projects. And when you're just starting with this, it might only be 1 or 2 projects that you're working on, but hopefully you're going to build that up. So, and then I would decide what I'm going to do next as far as when I'm going to call on each one of these. And then the bottom stack is I would pull out at the end of every month, and I would, the ones that say, so let's say the end of August now, I'm pulling out the bottom stack. Any piece of paper that said 9/22, I would move it to the top shelf. So basically I'm, I'm creating my own funnel. And a lot of you that are in sales full time, or even if you're not, you're probably familiar with the word creating a funnel. So that's what I was doing. So the top shelf had all the projects I'm going to follow up in August. And then I would, the next thing that I would do is I would have a calendar for all of my actual appointments. But back to the 2 stacks of projects, then I'd have a folder where I would have another piece of paper which would have the week's phone calls that I'm going to make. So if I was going to make a phone call to follow up with a project, I would put the name of the project on that piece of paper on one of the lines. And then I would have the corresponding piece of paper with it that had all the information about that project. So I hope that makes sense, kind of how I worked it. Then I had a calendar, like I say, with all the outside appointments that I was going to go see. Then I had kind of what I said before about the weekly to-do list that I had that correlated with each individual project. So I had that all in a manila folder, basically, that I would open up. On the left, when I opened it up, was the stack of projects that I was going to follow up on that week. And on the right was a piece of paper that had just the names of all those projects, and then I'd check them off as I went through. Now, if I didn't get to all of them, then I would move it to the next week or the next day. So I hope that makes sense. I had a really good database so I could quickly find people's names, phone numbers, addresses. And I can tell you that, people think, wow, Eddie, you have such a great memory. You remember all your clients. And I do have a pretty good memory with all that. But I also, before I would go see somebody, I would look at my database and I would say, okay, who's the receptionist? Who's the secretary? Who's the purchasing agent? Who's the architect I'm going to go see? So I would literally have this with me when I went in on a piece of paper so that I could review it right before I walked in the door. I highly suggest that you plan at night or on the weekends. I learned this very early in my career, that you don't want to walk in your office, whether it's at your home office or an office in a building, Monday morning at 8 or 9 o'clock and think, okay, what am I going to do today? You're already behind your competitors, or I should say you're behind the best competitors. So what I like to tell people is that if you follow a lot of the things I'm talking to you about, you will be in the top 10% of all salespeople that you compete with. And you're going to have to work really hard to be number 1 or number 2. But if you just, because most people don't do any of this, I can tell you from my experience, most salespeople are very disorganized. They don't really know what they're doing. So I hope you'll plan and get organized at night on the weekends when you're not rushed and you're not dealing with phone calls and emails and that type of thing. I had lists, or I should say categories of my clients, and I used the ABC list, meaning that the A clients were the most important to me, the B a little bit less, and the C were mostly transactional or one-time customers. Now, a lot of people would say, Eddie, are the A customers your biggest customers? The answer is sometimes. The reality is the A clients, and any of you that are in full-time sales, you'll understand this, is sometimes clients, to say the least, can be difficult, to deal with, and they have high demands, or they'll shop you to death, or talk to every one of your competitors. And I'm not saying it's bad to talk to some competitors, but if all they care about is price, I can pretty much tell you they're probably not going to be one of your A clients. So my definition of an A client has to do with trust, meaning trust and likability. So I trust my client and they trust me to give them the best service, to give them honest information. And so we have an honest, trustworthy business relationship. And they care about me and I care about them. And that's really what it is. So they could be a small, medium, or a large customer, but you know that they value your time and you value their time and you appreciate their business and they appreciate what you do for them. And again, I can tell you that a lot of people don't care about salespeople. They treat us poorly. And so if you can find the ones that really appreciate what you do and you have that great relationship, that'll be an A client. So of course, your goal is to move people from B to A, excuse me, and from and from C to B. And I think it's important to have these discussions with some of your clients, not all of them, because some of them won't get it. But if you have a client that's a B client or an A client, I would actually talk to them and say, I really appreciate your business. I work hard to earn your business every day. And you order for me on a regular basis, whatever that regular basis might be. And just let them know, hey, I appreciate it. And you are one of my most important customers. And with the B customers, you say to them, hey, I have this chart and I keep track of my customers. And, I really want you to be one of my most important customers, and put it on yourself to say, what can I do so that I can be more important to you, as opposed to the other way around. You don't ever want to say to a customer something like, hey, I want you to buy more from me or be nicer to me so that you'll be an A client. They're not going to like that at all. So put it on yourself and just say, will you please tell me, and by the way, the words please tell me, which I'm going to get to later, are extremely important in sales. We've talked a lot about being efficient, which really is what all these prior topics are. And that's what I want you guys to be, is efficient, highly efficient. Spend your time on things that work and figure out what doesn't work and quit doing it. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. So do the best you can to be as efficient throughout each day as you can. One of the best compliments I got was, Eddie, you don't seem to work that much. And I know that some people were jealous, and because I would go play golf in the afternoon or go to the gym. And it's because I was so organized. I had worked on the weekends to get organized. And during the day, I got my work done, in a timely manner. And that's what I hope you guys will do too. The next topic is follow-up. And follow-up goes hand in hand with organization. All these things kind of go together, but following up and knowing when to follow up is so important. And I made a huge mistake for a long time of trying to guess when to get back with a prospect or a customer that was a repeat customer and kept buying from me. And what happens if you guess is then you run the risk of irritating someone. And we all have our line in the sand where if someone calls us too much, whether it's a friend or a family member or a salesperson, then it becomes irritating. And so believe me, I've made all these mistakes, like I said. So if you will just say to your prospect or your ongoing customer is, when would you like me to follow up with you on whatever it is you're selling, on the next order or getting you more information. And if they say tomorrow, that's fine. If they say 6 months from now, that's fine. And here's the deal. A lot of sales, I would say most salespeople hate it when somebody says, get back with me in 6 months. But if you have this organizational ability and kind of like I did, where you put it in these stacks, and so then when 6 months comes around, you move it to the top, that particular project to the top stack, and you get back with them. And then you look at your notes and you say, Mr. or Mrs. or whatever their name is, in August of 2022, we talked and you told me to follow up with you, in February, whatever. And now it's February and I'm getting back with you. Most of them are going to be shocked. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, I really did say that. And you're doing what I asked you to do. And they're going to like that. So that's a very important thing to just ask, and don't try to guess. Just ask them when they would like you to follow up, because they have a million other things going on and they're going to appreciate that. Staying in touch with everyone is really important. You never know when somebody's going to place a big order or a small order. Even if someone has never ordered from you, but you think there's a potential, stay in touch with them. And that's what you're doing with your database, by the way, is it's prospects, it's customers. It may be people that have never bought from you, but you're growing your database, your potential client list, and you want to stay in touch with everybody. You want to be one step ahead of clients. And I give you so many analogies or examples of this, and I'm sure you can think of this in your own life with going to a store to buy something, and then and it's a big item or whatever, and they say it'll be, in stock next week, or, be here in a month, and then they never call you, and then you have to call them. So my point is, don't make your customer call you for anything. Now, that's probably impossible, what I'm saying, but if you can limit the number of times your customer or your prospect calls you, and you know what they need, and you keep in touch with them, that's the best thing. And be honest with them. So I'll just use carpet, for example, which I sold. So if the delivery was supposed to be today, and last Friday I found out that it was going to be delayed, for whatever reason, I would call them, email them, and let them know, I'm very sorry, but your shipment is going to be a little bit delayed, and I will keep you posted on what's going on. That way they don't have to deal with it. So that's the whole point of being a one step ahead of your client. Be prepared. Again, you want to be prepared. I guess this has a lot of meanings, but the main thing I want to tell you about being prepared, which we talked about with Peyton Manning, earlier, is literally every sales call that you go on face to face, every email that you send, every telephone call, text, know what the point is of the sales call, of the email. Don't just call somebody or to say hi or touch base. Have a specific 1, 2, or 3 things that you want to discuss with them. So back to my stack of papers, is what's going to happen is if somebody says, get back with me in a month, well, as you're reviewing projects and you come up, look at their piece of paper, you may think, oh, you know what? Last time I saw that person, I forgot to tell him or her this. And so then you make a note of it. That's called being prepared. So the next time you see that person, and then you will tell them that particular item. So that's being prepared and knowing what the purpose of every sales call, every email is, and have a purpose, and again, be prepared. Okay, the 20%, 80% rule. Most of you probably know that the other way around. So I'm going to tell you this 2 different ways. 80% of your business is going to come from 20% of your clients. And that's where I talk about the ABC list, is those clients that are A and some Bs are going to be your bread and butter. That's how you're going to make your living. And you want to take great care of those people. Now, the other way is the 20-80%. And this has to do with you individually or me as a salesperson and how we spend our time. And what I have found is that 20% of what we do as salespeople on a daily basis will produce 80% of our income. In other words, 80% of the things that we do are a waste of time, me included. And believe me, I used to waste a lot of time. And then I figured out, this is stupid, Eddie, stop doing it. Or I would talk to people and I would figure out this is not working. So be willing to change. I want to tell you about a big project I sold by staying in touch. And that's where we go back to the second point on this slide, is staying in touch with everyone. I mentioned earlier that I worked a lot with architects because they picked out flooring for commercial and residential buildings. So I had one specific architect that was a really nice person. I stayed in touch with them over many, many years, and I'm talking 10 plus years. Lots of times when I go there for an appointment, he wasn't available. So I would talk to his office manager and I would show her the samples and things. But the point is, I kept this person advised on what was new and current in my industry. And so he got to know me and he got to trust me. And that's what sales is all about, is trust. In fact, it's been proven that you have to see somebody face to face 5 times before they will ever begin to trust you. Now think about yourself. If you're going to buy some big ticket item or anything and somebody calls you up or emails you or whatever, I mean, it happens every day to us, but most people don't follow up and stay in touch. So you don't have that trust. So this gentleman had a lot of trust in me. I had, not done many projects with him, but he called me up himself one day and said, Eddie, I have a big project that I'm working on, and I would like you to handle all the flooring for this building. Now, I was elated. I was extremely excited. And I did a wonderful job for this architect and his client, and I made very good money myself. But the point I want to get across to you is he would never have called me had I not stayed in touch with him over many years. Next thing I want to talk about is psychology, which, by the way, I'm convinced psychology is basically everything in life. How we get along with family members, people that we work with. The number one thing with psychology is work on yourself, which most people, again, will never do. I promise you. If you work on yourself a little bit, you're going to be better than most. So you've got to figure out what you do, the way you communicate with people, all kinds of things about your own psychology, how much you talk, how much you listen, are you rolling your eyes? There's so much to do with psychology. After you've worked on yourself a little bit, and by the way, it's a lifelong process. I work on this all the time, and like everybody, I have things I have to work on. Okay, then you have to work with each client, and I don't mean work with the client, but try to figure their psychology out. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you another example. So worked with a lot of architects. Some architects, I would go in and sit down with them, and I'd spend 30 minutes or an hour with them. They were just really fun people. We'd talk a lot. Then there were others where I'd go into their conference room or their office, and they would not sit down. Now, if somebody doesn't sit down and you're going to make a presentation, it tells you they're in a hurry. Get to the point. So you've got to figure this out, and everybody has their own psychology, and you have to be a great salesperson. You've got to do what each client wants, and you have to act, you have to be able to change. I guess that's my point, quickly. And so you could go to one client for a 10 o'clock appointment, and you're going to act totally different than you will for a 1 o'clock appointment. Okay, we talked about things like how much do you talk? You talk too loud. Now, of course, every time I read that, talk too loud, I tend to talk a little bit softer because my nature is to talk too loud. But the reality is talking softer is actually better. People prefer that. Nobody wants to have somebody yelling at them or feel like they're yelling in their ear. Do you interrupt? Do you smile? And let's talk about smile for a minute. It's not just in person. When you're on the phone talking to anybody, they can tell whether you're smiling or not. So try to smile when you're on the phone. And it doesn't have to be a big smile. It can be just a little bit of a smile. Are you aware of your body movements? How much are you moving in your chair if you're sitting down or if you're standing? These things are very important. Eye contact is very important. Looking people in the eye, and the difference between listening and hearing. We all hear noises all day long. And when we're in a meeting or we're talking on the phone to a client, are we really listening and paying attention to what they're saying? That is so important. And this is a wonderful thing I hope you all will remember, is the best listeners are the most well-liked. This has to do if you're at a party with friends and you just listen to other people talk about themselves, their problems, things they're going through in their life. And the same thing applies to your clients. The best salespeople learn to talk less. And believe me, I had this problem where I used to talk too much, but over many years, I worked on this and became a very good listener. And listen without the intent to respond. This is so important. A lot of salespeople and people in general, they think they're a TV, news reporter or something where they've got to have know what the next question is. You don't have to know what the next question is. And that's what's nice about the next thing, which I talk, is taking notes. And so this is something that I did not used to do, but now I do regularly when I'm with a client, whether it's through SCORE or one of my paying clients, is I write everything down, kind of like hopefully a good doctor would, is they listen to everything. And you're not trying to respond to anything. You're just trying to gather information from your client about how they buy similar products to what you have, how they bought things in the past. So taking notes is really good because it helps a salesperson be quiet. It helps them pay attention. And then they have those notes for follow-up. So when that person, your client or prospect, stops talking, then you can look back at your notes and say, okay, you said A, B, and C. I'm not really sure. I didn't understand B. Can you give me a little bit more information on that? The point I want to make is you want your client to talk a lot more than you. Okay, the next line here, I need a helper, is more effective when I'm in person doing a talk. So I'll do it here because obviously we're all on the computer and you're seeing me on the computer. So I have someone come up to the front of the room with me and I tell the person to pretend that we work at the same company and we've just arrived at the office and we're crossing paths in the hallway or whatever in the morning, and we just say hello to each other. So I have the other person stand about 10 feet from me, and then we walk towards each other and just pass each other. And so we do that the first time, and I just say, hello, good morning. And they say, hello, good morning. And then I say, okay, now let's do this again. And so we cross paths again, and I put my hand up like this, and I say, hey, good morning, how are you? I know you weren't here last week, or you had a family problem. Tell me what's going on. The point I want you guys to make is we all say things to people just casually, like hi, how are you? And when we say how are you to people, most of the time, we don't really want them to stop and tell us about their problems. But if you really want, when it's appropriate, if you can do that, whether it's family member again, or in business and in sales, if you can really get to know somebody and listen about what's going on in their life or what the project they're working on, whatever, and really pay attention and make a note of it, that's going to help a lot. Within psychology is communication, and that's everything in life is how we communicate with other people. This is a very interesting statistic, and this has to do with mostly when people are face to face. I mean, I guess I don't know how it technically works when you're listening to me via the computer, but 55% of what people you get from people and how you feel about somebody is nonverbal. 38% is the tone of voice, which again, when I say tone of voice, it makes me talk a little bit softer. And only 7% of what we say is actually how people, what they hear from us. So the majority of what people get from other people when they're standing face to face or in a room is nonverbal. 38% tone and only 7% is the word. So that means you really got to think about your body movements. How much do you, I think I'll get to this in a minute, are you clicking a pen? You have some kind of a nervous habit that you're doing that's bothering people, which I used to have and may still. And again, the tone of voice is so important. So I've learned to talk softer, like I said before, not click a pen when I'm in a meeting because I was nervous sometimes. I've learned to take notes. So what are the things that you can do? I mean, these are things that you need to think about so that when you're in communication with people, they view you non-verbally, tone of voice, and the words in a better light. The words "please tell me" are very powerful. And I talked a little bit about that earlier when I was talking about like a follow-up date or whatever. Don't try to guess at it. Now I've added the words, "will you please tell me?" So if you're writing this down or whatever, will you please tell me? This has to do with any interpersonal relationship, family, business, at all. So if I walk up to any of you and said, will you please tell me about yourself? I would think that none of you would get upset with me because I'm not asking anything personal. It's the same thing with a client is, will you please tell me when would be the best time to follow up with you? Will you please tell me about the project you're working on and when you would like more information about the product or service that I sell? So those words, I promise you, I use that numerous times every day. I use it in emails. When you want something from somebody, you're following up with a customer and you want to find out when they want to get together with you again, you say, will you please tell me when would be the best time to get back with you? Will you please email me back and let me know when would be a good time to get together with you regarding whatever? The words "so that" or the word "because" will help you state the benefit of your product or service. So if you're selling computers and you say to me, Eddie, I suggest you buy this computer that I sell so that your life will be so much easier and so that it'll be easy for you to work with. You should buy this computer because it's so easy to type on, it's so easy to do A, B, and C. And that's what you want to do, is you want to always be stating the benefit of the product or service that you're offering. You probably all know that there's features and there's benefits of every product. So it's fine to state the feature, but you don't want anybody to say, okay, so you're trying to sell me a car and it has XYZ motor and I'm not a mechanical person, so I don't even know what that means. So if a car salesperson is telling me about the motor in a car that I'm looking at, then he or she better tell me the benefit to me. Otherwise, I'm just going to say, okay, so what? So always state the benefit. And if you can use the words "so that" or "because," that'll help you. I know how to juggle, and I'm not going to juggle here on the computer, but I do it with live audiences. And what juggling does for me is it gives me confidence. I highly suggest you think about something that you know how to do or you're working on that gives you confidence that most other people can't do. It's going to make you feel good about yourself. A lot of you might speak a second language. That's fantastic. I wish I did. I feel silly sometimes, only being able to converse proficiently in English. So try, and I use juggling. Another thing I want to tell you is I use juggling in my live talks because juggling has everything to do with sales. We're juggling 3 or 4 balls, and it's the same thing with our lives. You know, we have to go to the grocery store, we've got to go to the dentist, we've got to go make sales calls. We have a lot of things to do, and this all has to do with priorities, organization that I talked about. So how do you juggle all these tennis balls and keep them all in the air at one time? It's not easy. So I relate that, my ability to juggle, to my ability to be organized and follow up with my customers. The next thing I talk about is passion, fun, and profit. And I can almost guarantee you that if you are passionate about the product or service that you sell, you will have fun doing it and it'll lead to profit. Now, I hope I'm not doing this for any money. I'm doing this because I love helping other people, and I hope you're getting information out of it. So I am passionate about helping each and every one of you, make more money, have more fun, be a better salesperson. Now, it's hard to sell something that you're not passionate about. So I hope that you're in an industry and work for a company, or if you own your own company, that you're passionate and you get excited and have fun, because it comes across. And that's what I hope is coming across from me to you in this talk, is that I'm passionate about sales training and about making each of you better. And so for you guys, if you're passionate about it and you have fun, I promise you profit is going to follow and you won't have to be worried about that. A presentation without a demonstration is just conversation. And that's one of the reasons I use juggling in my presentations as a sales coach. But when I was selling flooring, obviously I would have samples of all these different materials that people could look at, feel, they could try to break it, whatever they wanted to do. And I highly suggest you do that. So think about something fun. One time I had somebody, it was a paying client of mine, insurance. He sold insurance, and like, well, how do I make that fun? And so we talked back and forth, and I think he came up with some kind of a flip chart or something with funny characters and drawings on it and things like that, kind of showing somebody who didn't have insurance and somebody who did. And so think, try to be creative and come up with something so that you present something, because literally, if you don't have a presentation, they're not going to remember you as much. And I can promise you, with my sales coaching, they would remember me because I juggled. And then they would think, oh yeah, you're the guy, I talked to a few months later, oh yeah, you're the guy that came in here and juggled. So that you will be memorable, and that's what you want. The last slide I get to before we go to Q&A is I want to tell you a personal story about me that I hope will help you guys. So I live in Albuquerque now, and I've lived here for a long time, but I grew up in Kansas City, and I became an Eagle Scout at the age of 14, and I went to Philmont Scout Ranch, which is in the northern part of New Mexico up in the mountains, and we hiked for 10 days. And so in parentheses, scrawny kid survives. I was that scrawny kid. I was not as strong as most boys that are 14 years old, not as rough and tumble. And that's just who I was. I'm not apologizing for it or not, whatever. The point is, it was harder for me to hike in the mountains and, do all those kinds of things for 10 days. It was harder for me probably than most of the other boys, but I did it. And I've done a lot of things that are hard. And the point I want to get across to all of you is we all have had bad things happen in our life. We all have had scary things. So for me, when I was in sales, and even now that I'm retired and I'm doing something that I might be a little scared of or might be difficult, I think back onto, wow, Eddie, when you were 14 years old, you came to, New Mexico on I guess a bus from Kansas City with all these other kids, and you did it, and then there's obviously many other things I could tell you about myself where I have overcome adversity. And that's what I want each of you to think about, is when you're scared to go make a sales call. And people think, Eddie, you were scared to make sales calls sometimes? Yeah, I was. There were people that scared me. sometimes I was just burned out and I had to figure out how to get my motivation again. And this happens to every salesperson. So if you can think back on things that you have done in your life that were scary or were difficult, that'll help you overcome current difficult times. So we've talked about the 3 ideas. We've talked about organization. I want hopefully all of you to be extremely organized. You've got to follow up on everything at the right time by asking the right questions to your client as to when would you like me to get back with you or follow up with you. And then we talked a lot about psychology and communication and how working on ourselves and then trying to figure out everybody else. And by the way, you are not going to get along with everybody. There are people that are not worth your time in trying to sell to. And that's a big thing I want to convey in sales. I don't care how big the potential is. If they are a pain in the rear end, if they're rude to you, if they're disrespectful, if all they care about is the price and they treat you poorly, I would absolutely fire them, forget them, whatever. There's always more fish in the sea. And so that's something else on psychology I hope you'll keep in mind. So now, Leslie, I think we're ready for questions and answers.
Okay, just type your questions into the Q&A. I do want to update everyone quickly on this week's webinars. We have help wanted, how to attract and retain your employees. We have cash is king, cash management for your small business. We have who's stealing my art, how to detect online plagiarism. We have e-commerce and alternative selling methods. We have basic steps to starting a business in New Mexico. I'm almost done. We have part 1 on developing a business plan. We have a bilingual session on accessing financial resources. We finish up the week on phone app. Is it right for your business? So we got a lot of webinars coming up. And can you just tell us real quick, because I know that we've added a handout that everyone that attended will receive on cold calling.
You want me to talk about that, Leslie?
Yeah, I just think just real quickly, because that's probably the scariest part of reaching contacts is the cold call.
Okay, so years ago, I created a white paper, I think it's 2 pages, on how to make a cold call. And it's been very effective because, like Leslie said, it's scary for a lot of people. It's what is my objective? And so, and Leslie's going to get this to you, each of you, and it's going to be on the SBDC website as well. So, I mean, I could go through the whole thing with you. But basically, I just lay out point by point what you're trying to do. And literally, when you make a cold call, I'll just whet your appetite a little bit about this, give you a little hint. All you're trying to do is meet the receptionist or the person at the front door and tell them in 15 seconds or less what you do. Get their name, their email, if you can, their phone number, and then find out from that person who it would be the right person for you to contact to talk about your product or service. And that is it, period. So your literally only goal is to talk and introduce yourself to the receptionist or whoever the person is that you talk to at the front door. And because that person, you know, we use the term the gatekeeper. If you don't, it's very important, let's just say, to treat that person as you would the president of the company. Because if you don't, you're not going to get to see the president of the company or the purchasing agent, because whoever the person is that you need to talk to is going to say to the receptionist, well, what did this person have to say? And the receptionist is going to say, oh, you know, he was or she was so nice, you know, and they, you know, we really had a nice chat. I think you ought to spend a few minutes with them. Now, in the converse, if you're not nice to that person, what's the receptionist going to say? Well, they're going to say, you know what, this person was kind of rude to me and just, you know, so I don't think you should spend any time with them. And guess what? You're out. So the cold call is really important, and I lay it out really easily for you. And I think all of you will enjoy reading through that.
We did have a comment come in that says that would be a good webinar, cold calling, and I do agree, because it is nerve-wracking actually walking in the door and finding out the best time of the day to reach them, and doing the sales tactics and stuff, because sometimes you know, isn't it, Eddie, a numbers game to a certain extent, or?
Well, yes, it is. It's a numbers game, but the critical thing is being so organized, because a lot of people, they're not organized and they think, oh, I'm going to go out and see 100 people over the next month or 6 months or whatever. And then they forget what they talked to the first person about and what they're supposed to do. So yes, it is a numbers game, but it's like a snowball that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's going to knock you down at some point if you're not organized. And so you've got to be organized. And so the person that talked about the cold calling, the webinar, I would highly suggest you read through this, and you're more than welcome to contact me directly. Do they have my contact information, Leslie, if they want to contact me directly?
Yeah, they can. They just email me and I'll get you in touch, and we'll get you with a counselor and everything. And also, I want to remind everyone that if you have questions that you want to bring back, we're lucky enough to have Eddie presenting for a couple more weeks. We do have a question that came in. I would love to learn more on how to approach customers from directly selling to a single customer standpoint. I am a soap maker. It may be just a tad different.
Directly selling. I'm not exactly sure what the question is. What
I think Josie is Josie, if you can elaborate, I'm wondering if she's I have to sell directly to a person that uses soap, not necessarily to a contractor. So she's
okay.
actually okay.
Okay, so she's selling person to person as opposed to a retailer or something like that. It sounds like
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So yes. Okay. It's a person that uses soap. Well, let's hope we all use soap. That's the first thing. Let me see. Sell directly to a person. I'm not sure how that's. I mean, I guess it's the same kind of thing, as you want to tell the person a little bit about, your product, and just, see if they have some interest in it without spending 10 minutes with them. Because even if it's just person to person, and I've had this before too. So Josie, maybe this is what you're talking about. I've been to, all kinds of functions where there's people selling things, and, they want to corner you and, talk to you for 30 minutes about their soap or their, whatever it is. And so my suggestion, if that's what you're asking, is to have one or two things that you want to tell the whole world about your soap, and to get their attention, and maybe have a sample of your soap right there and just say, try my soap, it's right here. My soap, the two features I want you to know about are A and B, and the benefits are, that correlate to it are this. And that's all you tell the person. So literally in 20 seconds, you can tell them. And if you like more, I'm here to answer more questions. But the point I think you might want to know is, you don't want to feel like you've cornered somebody and trapped somebody, whether it's at a trade show or, you have a booth or something. You want people to feel like they can leave and not have you upset with them. And I don't mean you personally, but me or anybody else. So, and I've worked a lot of trade shows. I mean, I know how this works. People are trying to get people's attention. I can tell you that at trade shows, if you have a table, it's best to stand literally in front of your table than behind your table. Because if you're at a trade show, Josie, or wherever, you want to be out amongst the people, and it's just a lot more friendly. I see it so many trade shows. Literally, people are sitting down, they're typing on their computer. They're not approachable. So you want to be looking at people. You want to be smiling. Maybe you have a sample of your soap in your hand that you hand to somebody, or if it's a liquid soap, you give them a sample so they can squirt on their hands to try. And that's where the demonstration, I guess, comes in. If you can quickly demonstrate your soap, I think that's going to be a good thing. So and you're welcome to contact me. Is it okay, Leslie, if I tell them my email address or not?
No, I'll just have them contact me, and we'll get
That's
them with
fine.
the counselor, because I think she says she has no ability to demonstrate. So I would think almost like I wouldn't say, but a 2-minute, because basically with soap, if she has to direct sell, then you're looking at doing it quickly to go on to the next person, but not rushing, which is a kind of, that's little expertise there. Yes, that's what Josie's saying. So she doesn't want to lose a sale if she gets bogged down with one person for a long time. So it's almost like she would have to develop like an elevator speech, but not a no. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I understand, and I think I need to talk to her more. And just so you know, for all of you listening, you can talk to Leslie, and if you want to talk to me specifically, Leslie can give you my information, or if you're just looking for a mentor, that's fine too.
Yeah,
so
yeah, we can definitely get them help, because it sounds like we've got a handle on, can you go to the next slide? I think we have some contacts information there for.
Are you talking to me now?
Yes.
Go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Let's see.
I think I put some contact, and I'll make sure I get all the contact information out to everybody. Yes. Okay, Josie, I'm going to send you some contact information in your follow-up email, and it'll have information on getting mentors and getting the free, getting you the free counseling, the no-cost counseling, and getting you in with some different resources to help you, because all these organizations, SBDC and Eddy and stuff, we're all here to help small businesses. And we're not talking about just startup, we're talking about every phase of your business. So, and I think we're just about out of time. Do you have any wrap up before we pop off?
No, I appreciate you guys attending. And like I said, if you want to listen to this webinar again on the website that Leslie will tell you about, or, come to another one, like Leslie said, throughout the month of, I guess, through September, the next month, whatever, I'm going to be doing this several more times. But I'm just a big write it down person. I mean, most people, they go to seminars or whatever, they don't write anything down. Again, it all goes back to organization. And we make grocery lists of what we're going to buy at the grocery store. So I think we need to make a list of what we're going to do with our business, or things we want to talk to a mentor about, myself or somebody else, things that we want to work on. I mean, obviously I have a lot of ideas, so we'll keep it short, but making lists.
Absolutely. I had someone else ask, send the information to me too, please. And thank you. Yes, I'll make sure everyone gets the information and the resources, and we'll make sure that we get you with the counseling and mentors and people in your local area. So anywhere in New Mexico.
Well, and the last thing I want to say, whether it's a counselor, a mentor, whatever, it's all the same thing. And what I want you to know, which I mentioned, is people that have ongoing mentoring are the most successful in life. And again, look at all these famous movie stars, athletes that make millions of dollars. Every one of them has a coach they talk to on a regular basis. And because there's always things coming up and we need people that are sounding boards to listen to us. And that's what I enjoy doing to help all of you guys.
All right, guys, that's it for today. And you guys have a great rest of your week. And thank you, Eddie. We will see you next time.
Okay,
Bye,
thanks, Leslie.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.